Hi, everyone. Thanks for tuning in to this NGWA Waterwell Journal video interview called Catching Up. This is Mike Price, Senior Editor of NGWA's Waterwell Journal. And today I'm speaking with Denis Crayon, CHST, Director of Health and Safety for Summit Drilling Company, Inc. in Bridgewater, New Jersey, a company he's been at for 15 years. Since 2013, Denis has actively served on the NGWA Contractor Section Board of Directors, where he is currently serving as the Vice President of the Contractors Section. And he serves on a variety of committees, among others, where he chairs the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee and serves on the Government Affairs Committee. He is also serving his second term as president of the New Jersey Groundwater Association. So with June being National Safety Month, we thought we'd catch up with Denis to go over a variety of safety-related questions. Welcome, Denis. Thanks for your time.
Thanks for having me.
You bet. Let's get started with our first question. In your role at Summit Drilling, which job site accidents do you see the most?
Well, primarily, it's going to be hands and fingers. And a lot of people that I work with, they want to see the driller's hands when they come out on site. They almost consider it an industry a joke to a degree, engineers and the like, depending upon the level of safety that a driller may or may not have, would determine whether or not they have all of their fingers. Now, and I can tell you that from practical experience that I've suffered a number of injuries to my own stitches, as well as broken fingers, lost fingernails, and the like.
How would you advise someone to combat these types of accidents?
Number one would be hand positioning. I was with a large oil company program for health and safety, and we were going over some of these things. And they said, never put your fingers where you wouldn't put your face. And in thinking about that is never put them in the blind spots, never put them in a position where you can't see where they may be going in the unlikely event that there might be a hazard that's going to be hiding out behind there. We see that guys are oftentimes, and our tools are our number two most important tool that we use on a regular basis, second only to our brains. And what we have a tendency to do is use them a lot, and oftentimes we will use them as an actual tool rather than getting that tool up to, including using them as hammers, and perhaps even trying to turn bolts and the like when we should be getting our hands on a wrench. Gotcha. And so again, as a follow-up, number one would be the positioning of our hands, and number two, of course, is the protection. I've been saying for a number of years now that when I first started in this industry, if I had two left-handed gloves, I was in great shape, but oftentimes I might only even have one glove. But even two left-handed gloves were better than none. So I encourage any employer that's out there listening, one of OSHA's mandates for personal protective equipment is that they shall supply PPE to all of their employees, and that's up to and including gloves, and it's the right type of glove for the hazard that they're facing.
Okay. Well, looking at your career, you've been in the industry for 26 years. Which accident is the worst that you've seen?
It's all about the hands and fingers, and I've gone through my own set of them, and I think we're going to cover that in a follow-up question to this. I watched one of my helpers, an apprentice, some years ago. We were moving drums as we were getting done with a job, and they were full of soil, and we were moving them into the back of the truck. And unfortunately, he managed to cut off 3 of his fingers using the lift gate. Again, bad positioning of where he had his hands, and he was lifting up that gate, and he actually closed it on the back of the truck, right up against his fingers, and eventually they were still intact when we got the lift gate back down, but they had to remove them. Very unfortunate. A terrible accident that just didn't have to happen. And on that note, the National Safety Council, Summit Drilling is a member of, and I'm sure a lot of the companies that are out there listening now may also be members. And one of the things that they say is that 85 to 87% of all the injuries that I have dealt with, the ones that I have lived with over the years, I could have done something about, and that's directly. The other 15 to 17%, 18%, well, that could be the other people that are around me. But looking at it from the light that the National Safety Council shines on there, it is absolutely important that we're paying attention to what we are doing, and we can really be alleviating a lot of the injuries that we suffer.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said. Can you tell me personally? Well, it may or may not be personally, but one of the silliest accidents that you've seen in your years in the industry?
Silliest accident would have been my own, taking a 16-pound sledge with about 3 inches left of handle on there, and I was trying to break out the pin for a center bed on a plug, and I was swinging away, and every time I swung that hammer, every single time I came down on that, and I'm swinging it, and I got a punch in my hand, I'm saying, get another hammer, get another hammer, get another hammer, and wham. And for those of you who have done similar things, you can imagine what that feels like. And I got in a fight with the boss just moments after that about whether or not I need to go to the doctor and get it looked at, because he's saying it's broken, you need stitches. It's not broken, I don't need stitches. And for the men that might be drillers out there in particular, when we lose a day's worth of pay, it's a very uncomfortable position to be in. And so we have a tendency to grab the paper towels and the electrical tape, and we bandage ourselves up and we press on. Not a great idea. Now, in this instance, I did happen to lose the argument with my boss. I did go to the doctor and got it x-rayed and got it looked at, and they said it's not broken and we can't stitch it. It was busted open, similar like what you might see a watermelon being dropped from 10 or 12 feet off the ground. So it was in pretty bad shape, but nonetheless, they did what they could to wrap it up, tighten it up, and off to work I went. But if my memory serves me right, I took the rest of that day off. So I was definitely not going out drilling that day. But any time that my intuition is telling me that what I'm doing may be or may result in an injury, chances are pretty good that at least at my stage of the game that I should be paying attention to my intuition. I encourage anyone, no matter how old you are, to do that. But we oftentimes discount our intuition when it can really be telling us some important things.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. And lastly, what is your policy? What is your company policy on the use of smartphones for business and personal use on the job site, and as it relates to safety, how that could be an issue using the smartphone on the job site?
Well, any type of phone. Many of us that are probably listening, we've been running to payphones for years, and now if you run for a payphone, if you even have any change on you, you're not likely to find an operational payphone. And so we rely upon these cell phones. But the problem, at least in part of what we've seen in the last 10 years, is that we've become so reliant upon them that you'd be hard-pressed to find a human being walking around without, at least, if it's not in their hand or stuck to their head, that they've got it in one of their pockets. So for some drilling, some years ago, going back probably 2008, 2009, somewhere in that area, when we were seeing they were just using them way too often, way too much, not only driving to and from site, but also while working. Some years ago, we had an apprentice, and I was out there. If anybody's familiar with air knifing, it's a great time. It's a great way to break into the industry, but it can be rather brutal. And he had actually tucked his cell phone up underneath the suspension of his hard hat so he can yammer away while working with a compressor screaming, and that was just unacceptable. And as a driller on site, and this is for all health and safety that's on site, you have to have somebody who is in charge of health and safety. And your competent person is going to be your driller on site, and it's their responsibility to make sure that their workers aren't doing anything that is unsafe. And what we see with cell phones is it's so distracting that it makes it very difficult for us to be paying attention to what we're doing, that which is right in front of us, and that which we have to take care of. It's going to be our hands. It's going to be our coworkers. It could be our life on the line if we're distracted by a phone. And so our policy at Summit Drilling is we are not permitted to operate a cell phone while operating motor vehicle. If the thing rings, first of all, it should be either turned off or silenced, and that's part of our policy. If for any reason they have forgotten to do so, or if they're running late and they're expected to call a client and say, hey, we're running late, then they're required to pull over to a safe area, and then they're permitted to use their phone. But they're not permitted to use it. Even sitting at a stoplight or something like that, they're required to keep that silent. They're required to keep it off, one or the other. but they're not permitted to use them while operating motor vehicle. And on site, we leave the discretion primarily up to the driller, but overall, there are no cell phones in the actual work area. And if and when a driller is in a position where he or she, we only have he's, but if that were the case, then they are required to shut down, move away, and then use their phone. And again, and that would be a work-related responsibility of theirs when they're making or taking phone calls. It should be work-related. And if they wanted to make personal phone calls, we don't have any issue with that. But that would be during their breaks. So I believe and I hope I answered that sufficiently.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing. And thanks again for your time, Denis. Thanks everyone for tuning in to this video interview. And remember to continue to visit waterwelljournal.com for new content like this each month. Thanks, Denis.
Thank you very much. Drill safe, drill smart.